So I didn't think I was going to be doing this video. A lot of you guys asked me to do it. You wanted me to talk about everything going on with IHOP Kansas City and Mike Bickle and all of that stuff. And for a while, I was just like, it's not my world. I'm going to stay in my lane. I talk about Reformed theology and things happening with Reformed theologians. But enough of you asked. And also, I saw something tonight that was like, I don't know a lot about IHOP. I don't know a lot about Mike Bickle. Like, I know of him, but I don't really know that ministry because, again, it's just not my world. But I do know about this video. I do know about what's going on now, and that is marketing. I've talked a lot about Christian marketing over the last couple of weeks, and I'm talking about it again because we have some real intense marketing going on from IHOP Kansas City, trying to paint themselves out as victims, trying to shift the blame onto survivors of abuse rather than on them as a local church for failing. And just by Mike Bickle's own words, which we will look at, they failed in holding him accountable in the years past. And it seems if all these accusations, I'm not going to go into detail. You can go to julieroyce.com and you can find out, or julieroycereport.com. You can just Google Julie Royce and you will find all the information you need about what's actually being levied against Mike Bickle in IHOP Kansas City. If you need all that, you can go there for that. I'm here to talk about the spin that's happening right now, the marketing that's being attempted by IHOP Kansas City and by Mike Bickle, and how disturbing it really is. So let's just take a look. This is a video that they dropped tonight. This is why I'm making the video. I saw this and I was like, I don't know about IHOP, but I do know about this. I want to talk about this. And, I have learned not a lot of people here online are going to be critical of megachurch pastors when it comes to these things. They'll just wait and be silent, and then that thing will go away because of lawyers, and then there's nothing that's ever said. So here we go. Let's just start.
Greetings in Christ, everyone. There's a lot to cover, so I'm going to jump right in. There are some reoccurring themes and frequently asked questions that we're seeing, so I'd like to address a few, starting with the topic of the independent investigation. That really should be the primary and main focus right now. For clarity, the David House Agency is not the group conducting the independent investigation. Also, the David House Agency is not operating as an innocence advocate for Mike Bickle. We are engaged to represent the International House of Prayer, Kansas City, the organization, not Mike.
Okay, so if you're already confused, here's what's going on. This guy is a marketing guy. He is a PR team. Like he represents a PR team, and they've been hired by IHOP Kansas City to kind of prove like that IHOP Kansas City is innocent in all of this, like, or at least to represent them as not being as guilty as everything that's being said about them online. And you'll see that in just a moment here. But I do want to point out some specific things. All right, before we move on, let me just again make sure everyone knows I'm not an expert on how to talk about abuse. I know I personally have misspoken several times, and I know that I probably will at some point in the future too. So I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm not saying I'm better than anybody else. But what I am trying to say is that we need to be a lot more careful about how we talk about abuse, and specifically, we need to be careful about how some of these PR teams and lawyers talk about what's going on, and look at some of the wording that they're going to use. Like, even as he started this thing, he said that right now what needs to be focused on is the third party investigation. In other words, he's saying, let's stop talking about everything else. And here's where things have really begun to, come to a halt on this thing as far as, what we're concerned with as IHOP Kansas City. And that is the third party investigation. Now, to be fair, I think a third party investigation is a good thing, and that it should be something that they consider. But when you kind of shut down all conversation outside of that, it makes you go like, oh, okay, this is what's really important. And who's responsible for this third party investigation not moving forward? All right. That's what he wants to kind of implant into your mind. It's the marketing here isn't as subtle as you might think.
There's a lot of unfair scrutiny right now coming down on IHOPKC, and they're being accused actually of things that are blatantly false. So that's part of what we're here for, along with their legal team, is to kind of help walk them through this difficult season.
It's so difficult for us. Oh, how many times have we been through this? This is what I'm talking about. These are the things we can talk about that we have knowledge of. How many times have we seen a mega church, because of their own faults, because of their own failures? Which again, we are going to look at Mike Bickle's own words and show how Kansas City, IHOP Kansas City, failed in how they approach things, even without knowing all of the allegations, accusations, knowing how to prove, how to disprove, whatever, all of that kind of stuff. I'll leave that up for an actual third party investigation. But by his own words, they failed. And what he's trying to say here is actually we've been having a really difficult season through all of this stuff. We're pretty innocent in all of this, and we don't deserve this, and it's unfair. The criticism that we've been getting online. Well, a couple things. I always remember with Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. You got a lot of power, you got a lot of influence as a mega church, you got a lot of responsibility too. All right. So if you want to have that kind of influence, and if you make a mistake, prepare. Prepare to have those mistakes broadcast to the world. I'm a YouTuber. I know all about that. All right. If you misspeak, if you make a mistake, the rest of the internet's going to let you know about it. They're going to hop into that comment section. They're going to say some things that you're not going to like. And this is IHOP Kansas City saying, it's unfair what's going on to us. Essentially saying, hey, we're the victims in all of this.
Also, I said this on Sunday, but I'll repeat it. IHOPKC is completely separate and distinct from Mike Bickle. Although he would teach and advise on the base, he has not been on staff for several years, and that's an important point.
Yes, I agree. A very important point. Do you see the failure? Do you see the failure? Part of the thing about being on staff at a church, being a called elder, a qualified pastor of a local church, is the accountability that comes with it. And you can't be a called pastor, an elder of a local church, without that accountability, right? Because you don't know as a congregation whether that pastor is actually qualified or not. And that's one of the main things about being a pastor, according to the Apostle Paul, is that they have to be qualified. They must meet up to this high standard of holy living. And Mike Bickle, by his own words, didn't do that. And the church didn't hold him responsible. And they continued to let him teach. Now, maybe the church didn't know. And I'm sure all of that's going to come out in an actual third-party investigation. But right now, what he's just said is that he was not a pastor and he continued to teach. And this is one of the things that I get so hung up on with a lot of these like non-denominational churches, and just kind of like a little bit more lax about how ecclesiology works, like the governing of the church, is when you have like whoever come in and they get to preach on a Sunday, you get speakers. And the problem with speakers is that speaker can say something wrong at the time and not be held accountable for those things that have been said wrong, or they can live in a way that's detrimental to the body of Christ, and no one can hold him accountable. Like, you have to be among the people in order for them to know you're qualified. These things are not separated. Like the stage and the pews are not separated. Like, you can't do that. And a lot of churches have failed in that way. And because of that, things like this can happen, where you have someone who was teaching and not qualified to teach. And by Mike Bickle's own words, at least at some point in time, he was unqualified to teach and was still teaching. And because these guys didn't know him and they continued to let him teach, now they're bearing some responsibility for having given him that platform and that ability to remain in a position of a pastor without knowing whether he was qualified to be that pastor. Is a huge problem with megachurches.
All communications to or for Mike Bickle need to be directed to his legal representative, Patrick McKernany, at Spencer Fain LLP.
Stop talking to us
Now,
about it.
on the topic of attorneys, let me address that. In this situation, in particular, the presence of attorneys is actually a good thing. They help to introduce a measure of accountability, and they also help clients know what their rights are.
That's really easy to say when you have all the lawyers on your side. When you have all the power, when you have all the money on your side, it's really easy to say, well, they're all just here for our safety. Yeah, sure, half of them, are here just solely to represent us and to look out for our well-being and to criticize everything you say, but they're just here for everyone's good. Really easy to say when you got all the lawyers.
Honest process should not cause anyone to feel nervous with the presence of attorneys. So let me just break that down.
All right, before he breaks it down, what he just said, uh, slightly condescending, but also like just it's just foolish. Like, okay, well, essentially what he's trying to communicate is that if you have nothing to hide, then it's fine, right? Like, why would you be nervous? Let's let the truth have its day, right? Okay. But we all know how that works in real life, right? Like, we know that the truth doesn't always get out, and not everyone who's going to sit at that table is going to have the best motivations. Example, if you are driving down a street and you see way down the road that there are a bunch of cop cars and they have like their speed guns out and they're having like a trap. There's tons of cars pulled over, they're all getting tickets for going too fast or getting all like the lights inspected on their car, all that kind of stuff. It happens, right? If you're at a stoplight and you see that down the road and you see, well, I can actually go left here and still get to my destination, or I could go right past it, which one are you going to do? I know for me, even though I have nothing to hide, even though I drive like a grandma, I'm going to be turning left. All right. I don't want to invite that kind of criticism. I don't want to have to go through that. It's unnecessary. It's not something that I would look forward to. And even though I'm innocent, I don't want to have to go through that. It makes me nervous. What if they try to find something? What if there's something I didn't think of? What if I made a slight mistake? Right? And that's what lawyers do. They capitalize on those mistakes. They make smaller mistakes into bigger mistakes, and sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes it's how some people get off without having to really go through any process of restoring justice to anybody, because like they messed up on the paperwork, or they said the wrong date, or they said something that was slightly confusing, and now we're really skeptical about their entire story. Like that's what would make anyone nervous. So like the whole idea of being like, well, if you're innocent and you have nothing to hide, okay, again, you have all the lawyers. It's really easy to say that when you got all the money on your side. But also, I think it's reasonable for any person to look at a room full of lawyers and be like, I'd rather not. Like, but let's see his drawings. This is interesting.
We have is the advocate group, along with the main alleged victim, who are represented by an attorney. The International House of Prayer, KC, has also hired an attorney, and Mike Bickle has hired an attorney.
This is glass. He has a glass pane in front of him. Like, wow. Like they really set up this shot so you can't even see that glass. It looks so cool. So I'm just, hey, I'm trying to give them compliments where I can.
Lawyered up, as we say. Lord help us.
Okay. So you just said, like, if everyone is innocent, why would anyone be nervous about lawyers? And then you're saying everyone's lawyered up. Lord help us. Like, if you're innocent, if IHOP Kansas City is so innocent, why would they be concerned about people lawyering up? Right? Like, it's weird logic to be using. It doesn't make sense. All it's meant to do is to say like, oh, we would just like to have, the lawyers done away with and be able to have, conversations with people and do this like, the Christian way. Well, the Christian way failed, right? Because IHOP Kansas City allowed this to happen under their watch by Mike Bickle's own admission. Once again, I'm going to keep on. I'll say that several times as we move forward here. We'll take a look at his letter that he released. But like that happened, that failed. So now, yes, we have lawyers involved, and it's totally fair for someone who is looking at a megachurch and accusing a megachurch pastor, even in the past, a megachurch pastor of all these things. They should have a lawyer, yes, because you hired a bunch of lawyers. So yes, the survivor of abuse, the one who is making all these accusations and allegations, yes, they deserve to have a lawyer. I don't know what logic he's trying to use because he just used it the other way. It's bad marketing, to be honest. Let's keep going.
Has now engaged an independent third party, Lathrop LLP, to conduct an independent investigation into the allegations against Mike Bickle.
You guys see it? You guys see it? Maybe you can't because of my screen here. But what he just did is he just made, all right, that you have these 4 circles, and look what lines are attached to that middle circle. So far, none. What's being attempted here is to say that IHOP Kansas City has nothing to do with this. This is really about the accuser and Mike Bickle, the defendant of these allegations. It has nothing to do with us. We are not involved. He was your pastor. He was your pastor. He was on staff at your church. You were the ones who were supposed to hold him accountable. These allegations, to my knowledge, are about the time when he was on staff at your church. So you don't get to draw lines and say, well, actually, it's about him and none of this is really about us. That's not how this works. That's not how churches work. This is not just bad marketing. This is bad, trying to spin things away, and we don't want any blame for anything. This is also really horrible ecclesiology because you're essentially saying that the church is not responsible for anything that the pastor does. That's not how churches work. All right. I was under the impression that IHOP Kansas City was a local church. So maybe their pastor should be treated like he's a local church pastor.
So what that means is that IHOPKC, the organization, has entered into a legally binding contractual agreement with Lathrop LLP in which they agree to pay for the independent investigation.
Guys,
while IHOPKC is shouldering the burden of this investigation, IHOP does not control in any way the investigation. It has no ability to dictate the process or the outcome.
Okay. So the only way that IHOP Kansas City is really involved in this is figuring out the truth, right? We just hired the guys. We just took it upon ourselves to hire a third-party investigation team, and we're paying for it. We're shouldering the financial burden. You're no saints, okay? Stop. It's one thing to say, and I think it's right to say, that not all the blame falls at IHOP Kansas City, right? There are tons of good people there that didn't know anything about any of this stuff, who are just trying to serve the Lord and be faithful in their local church. That's fair to say. What's not fair to say is saying that we're the good guys. We're paying for this out of pocket. Yeah, because you should. But also, maybe you didn't pick the right team. I don't know about this third-party investigation. I know there's all kinds of criticism about this organization that's been picked and how the accuser didn't have any say in any of this stuff, and they just hired this team. And I think there's something to that, especially if you're hiring PR teams that are this awful, who are coming at this and saying all this stuff, basically shifting all the blame, as we'll see in just a second, to the people that are accusing Mike Bickle. I would not trust them. I would not trust them if this is what they're doing here.
And just an important question that's being asked. Yes, a report will be released upon completion of the investigation. All of this has been communicated to the advocate.
Okay. I care about marketing. I care about marketing. And I know that words are chosen. Like, even again, just like, look at this. Look at this. Look at the lighting. Look at how everything is positioned. His notes are even positioned in such a way to make it like more inviting. He's drawing on things, so it seems more casual, even though the glass pane is, I understand how that works. Guys, I I have a hard time wearing glasses because sometimes you can see the light reflections in them. All of this is staged, is what I'm trying to say. The words that he is using are all calculated. All right. And what he is trying to say here is that a report will be made. You know what that doesn't mean? The report. There's a difference between those two articles, a and the. All right. A report could be a report that's totally redacted, that doesn't really have that much information. Maybe it's just a summary, or maybe it's just a few findings that they crafted in order to look a certain way. All right. I'm not saying that they would, but that's what a report can mean. The report means everything we found. That means the whole thing. That means everything that has gone on, the good, the bad, the ugly, it's here in the report. A report is not the report. And what he just did is he deceived people. He really did. I don't use that word lightly. He deceived people into thinking, okay, well, yeah, that sounds reasonable, right? Oh, the report is going to be released because he said it. He said it in the video. Didn't you hear him in the video? He said the report is going to be released. No, he did not. He said a report will be released, and there is a huge world of a difference.
The investigators started last week. IHOPKC turned over their documentation. The alleged victims and the representatives of the advocate group were contacted by the lead attorney last Friday. And now this entire equation rests with the advocate group's willingness to participate and present their evidence to Lathrop LLP.
Remember at the beginning how he said, we want to shift all of our focus on what's really important, the third-party investigation that we handpicked, that we're paying for, that we're overseeing the report that's going to be released about it. All right. That, he's saying, is the holdup is because of the victim. Because the victim, because of Boz Chekvejian, who's representing the accusers, that they're the ones who are holding things up. We want to get things done. We want to get things dealt with properly. It's really them that's responsible for this thing. What is this? This is shifting the blame onto them and saying that they're just not working with us. We would love to get this thing figured out, but they're the ones who are holding up everything.
There are many people online claiming that they have seen direct evidence that allows them to conclude beyond a shadow of a doubt that Mike Bickle is guilty of all of the allegations. Many of these people are former leaders or were influential members of this community, but repeated requests have been made for these individuals to share the evidence, yet they have refused. People on social media are claiming to have seen evidence, but when they get asked to elaborate, they either block you or simply go crickets. Seriously.
Again, everything here is crafted, and I just find it so weird that he just said they go crickets. Seriously? Like, it's one thing. Again, a weird thing to do is to come in with like a mocking kind of tone like that to people who are saying that the senior pastor they know did awful things. Is a weird, disposition to be like, you know what, I'm going to mock those people. They go crickets. Seriously. And he even put up like this tweet where he's literally using cricket emojis. All right, this is unserious, like on a very serious matter. This is not anything to really joke about. And here he is. They go crickets. Seriously. Now, I do agree that if you're going to go online and say, I have information, I know it's true, then you should probably come out with the information. But again, in a perfect world, that makes sense, but we don't live in that perfect world. We live in a world that's ruled by power and money, and you're getting contacted by lawyers because of something you said online. I understand why you might block or go private or run away screaming because you don't know what's going to happen because they got lots of money and lots of lawyers and they're coming after you now. And you don't like, maybe you heard something and you said something online and maybe you said it a little bit too bold, and then you got to like pay for it. You might get sued for it, all that kind of stuff. It's happening all the time. And so I understand why someone might be like, oh crap. Well, I did see something, but I'm not going to talk about it with you. I don't want to get sued, and so they go crickets. I could understand why that would happen. Now, again, if they do have information that would be helpful, I think they should come forward.
IHOPKC is not working to exonerate Mike Bickle in any way,
Even though we just tried.
but is not able to just simply blindly accept the advocate group's allegations either. IHOPKC wants the truth. Establishing proof of the truth is possible. It is the first step. We just need the parties to come forward and lay cards on the table.
All right. So once again, who is responsible? It's the survivors. It's the accusers of abuse. Like, they're the ones who are saying that the abuse happened, and they're just unwilling to come forward and sit at the table with us, with our 30 other lawyers, and go through all the fine details and have them criticize like everything that they've ever said and watch out for any inconsistencies, because that's what lawyers do, and capitalize on every single one of them. You understand why they would maybe not want to go through with this process? I could definitely do that. Now, they should in some way get a third party investigation going and be able to come to a good conclusion about who that is and what's going to be done and who's in charge of the report that's going to be released. I think that's actually probably the linchpin of this whole thing. But another thing that's not being as discussed is Mike Bickle. Lots being talked about with IHOP Kansas City, but not necessarily a whole lot being talked about with Mike Bickle himself. Now, Mike Bickle has been quiet, right? Because, that's what people do when there's these kinds of allegations. They go into hiding. We've seen it over and over and over again. And Mike Bickle finally came out with a statement. Now, you can find this online. It's a public thing on, but I think Christian Post had it up there, and I think he put it on Facebook. It's everywhere, so you can find it. I'm not going to read all of it, but I do want to read the first two paragraphs here. So it says, "To my family and friends, with a very heavy heart, I want to express how deeply grieved I am that my past sins have led to so much pain." So right off the bat, affirmation that there has been past sins. And in this circumstance, past sins have led to so much pain, confusion, and division in the body of Christ in this hour. I sadly admit that 20 plus years ago, which is a distancing that doesn't need to be said, he's just trying to say, oh, this is allegations from way a long time ago. You mean when you were on staff at your local church? At that time? Oh, okay. I sinned by engaging in inappropriate behavior. Inappropriate behavior. That could be literally anything. This is as vague as you could get. All right. Again, this is carefully crafted. Mike Bickle didn't write this on his own. He wrote it with his lawyer. And, and I think it's pretty clear because he's taking ownership of things, but he's not taking ownership of everything. And he's not even taking ownership of specific things. I sinned by engaging in inappropriate behavior. My moral failures were real. All right. Moral failures. So this is not just sin in general. He's talking about specific actions. And related to this, we would assume that this is about sexuality. In fact, he says so. I am not admitting to the more intense sexual activities that some are suggesting, which means that he is admitting to some sexual activities, which again, he was a pastor of a local church. So disqualifying right off the bat. I don't care if it was 20 years ago, disqualifying. I don't care if it's, with someone and it's consensual within, that local church. It is spiritual abuse. Anytime this happens, it is Clergy, spiritual abuse. I fully believe that. And here, what he's saying is so vague about more intense sexual activities. What does that even mean? All right. Because he doesn't even say, like, I don't want to get into the specific word choices, but I think you can fill in some blanks there that some are suggesting. I hate my sin, and I see it as a serious and grievous before a holy God. I take all sin seriously. And this to me is like the phrase that people are just not talking about. I take all sin seriously, so on those occasions I quickly and sincerely repented in a way that resulted in receiving assurance from God, followed by a daily resolve to live holy in all of my ways, and maybe to confess these things to your other qualified elders. No, 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 that's not being said here. Or maybe to tell your church that you are in grievous sin and that you have disqualified yourself from pastoral ministry. Nope. But he quickly got, he were repentant, and he received assurance from God. Basically, God gave him a get out of jail free card. That's what that means. I'm not talking about like actual jail. I'm saying that he disqualified himself. Any sexual activity outside of marriage, a covenanted marriage, we would say is sin, right? And you look at what Paul tells Timothy in 1 Timothy chapter 3 with the qualifications: a one woman man. All right. You're not a one woman man. You're unqualified from pastoral ministry. So, how is God just going to be like, I'm going to give you assurance, keep going? You don't need to tell anyone about it. You don't need to repent of your sin publicly. I don't think anyone else knew, but he's saying that God gave him assurance, which just that just ticks me off. Followed by a daily resolve to live holy in all of my ways. Except for these specific ways. God graciously helped me to respond in those times with a broken and contrite heart that was filled with godly sorrow. I felt really, really bad, and so it's fine. I don't need accountability because I'm Mike Bickle, because I'm this big shot pastor. And once again, mega church pastors, I don't believe are biblical, because there's no way to hold him accountable in the same way as you would a pastor of a 300-person church where people know him, where people are living life with him. When he's just someone who shows up on a screen or shows up on a stage, you don't know that person. You can't hold him accountable. That's not qualified eldership. To this day, I remain sorrowful about those past failures. I'm sure you do. I am anguished that my past sins have caused great pain for my wife and family, along with IHOP Kansas City family and others. I am deeply sorry that my sin put IHOP Kansas City leadership and community in a very painful and difficult position. I ask my family for forgiveness. I now ask for forgiveness from the IHOP Kansas City family and many in the body of Christ. You know who he doesn't apologize to? The person he did these things to. This is guilt of a disqualified pastor, which Kansas City should have been doing a better job. So they did fail in holding their pastor accountable. And they did fail in letting him continue to be in ministry, because they didn't even know this guy. They didn't know what was going on. And sure, you could be like, well, he hid it from everybody. We'll find out if there's an actual third-party investigation, whether that's actually true or not. But even still, there is a failure there because you didn't know your pastor well enough to find these things out. And, even now, like, why aren't they upset? Like, there are people still who are defending Mike Bickle in this whole thing. And it's just crazy when he says these things that you go like, there's so much guilt in these words. And also the fact that once again, he remained in ministry. This is 20 plus years ago. Okay. And he was in ministry the whole time. Come on. All right. Now you could be like, well, he wasn't on staff, which is what that PR guy was trying to do. Well, he was fulfilling all the responsibilities and duties as unto an elder. You better be qualified for that. So it's just interesting how this is working, how this is being spun. I think we need to be very, very, not just like looking for the failures, of different words that are being used, and looking for, what spin they're trying to do, but understanding that when it happens, as I think you've seen pretty clearly in this video, being able to articulate that, yeah, that's spinning it. And I don't think it's appropriate for a church. If they want to get ahead of certain things and try to defend themselves, I think there are better ways to do that than shifting the blame onto these survivors of different kinds of abuses, not just with this situation, but with others as well. It often happens. And maybe understand that when you have all the power, um, one, yes, like Spider-Man said, you bear the responsibility, but also understand where someone who's coming from a weaker position might be a little bit timid, and especially when it comes to these issues, because the church has already failed them, why they would be a little bit cautious about entering into another situation where they're going to have all these lawyers and all these people in authority, looking at everything they've ever done and said and trying to find those inconsistencies. Understand that maybe they want to have a say in the report that comes out about it, how it's done, what's being investigated, the scope of it, all that kind of stuff. They might want to have a say too, not just for the one who is shouldering the financial burden. Anyways, that's my thoughts. I probably won't be discussing any more about IHOP Kansas City. I don't want to go into the details about everything else. I'm more concerned with what I do know, because I don't know all the other stuff. I want to stick to what I know, and what I know is this was spin. Let me know what you think about all this down in the comments section, and I'll see you in another stream probably this weekend. I'll see you then.